www.oghuskyradio.com. Broadcasting live a little northeast of LA, where we usually broadcast from. But I want to thank you for your hospitality and inviting us here to do this interview. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Of course, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Chaz Bojorquez. I'm a Los Angeles graffiti writer. I started in 1969, and I haven't stopped. So over 50 years of writing.
1969. Who did you see up? Because everybody always says, "Oh, I saw Chaz up. I saw the river. I saw this." Who did you see? Like,
listen, there was always graffiti when I was young, because graffiti started since the 40s, since World War II and all that. But it was always gangster, and then it was always limited to the rivers. That's the way how I was introduced to the gang writing, and we would find it inside the street. Drainage tunnels that would all empty into the river. We'd walk up there about a mile or so, and then we would find all this graffiti up in the ceiling from the 1950s, 60s, and the 70s, and all that. I mean, well, that was around the 70s. And
what were we looking at back then? Were we looking at block letters, colors, or just?
It was mixed. Something. It was mostly Anglo writing. It was words like John and George, 1950s, and all that kind of stuff.
Because LA was a little different back then.
It was different. It was a lot of hobo writing and all that. And they would write kid, so kid so-and-so and kid this and all that. And then around the late 60s and the 70s, that's when you started seeing the blocks. And it became really evident. And you started seeing them also in the concrete and the sidewalks. There's a certain date, around a certain few years right there, when everything started to change and all that. That's what I loved. That's what I liked.
What year did you start using aerosol? Because back then it was paintbrush, correct?
I'm one of the very few in the 1950s when I was maybe about 6, 7 years old, and after we would buy model car kits with plastic and all that. In 1955 was the first spray cans, and they were little small ones, maybe about 2, 3 inches tall, and all that, little small cans. And we thought they were the coolest things, and they were called Petra. Was the company, but it took about another 10 years to finally get the can that we recognized and all that. So the early 60s or something like that. So I didn't notice it, used it as a writing instrument until I started seeing it on the streets, probably around the early 70s.
And was it the same company? Was it Petra, the same company that made
it? No, it was Krylon.
Oh wow! So
Krylon and Rust-Oleum, and all that. They were the only two. And Krylon was it was crap, and all that. I really hated the spray paint.
But what? Well, we could go in that. But what is it with the paint with Krylon that they go through like phases of like it? They might, but then they come out with the crappiest yellow. Like, what is it? Is it we need someone like you on the board or something? Or?
No, for me it was only one color, black.
Okay.
But it had weak pressure, really watery, and it would drip down. Not a lot of pigment. And it would spit. There was only one tip at that time. There was only one can, Nowadays, they put the cans in ice coolers to tone it down. They have pressure and all that. Different. They mix can-to-can colors, all that stuff.
Do you do that?
No. Something? I threw the can away. I went back to what I knew, the brush. Because the brush to me is, I use a chisel. Brush, skinny one way and fat the other way. Yeah. It's like a gigantic felt marker. So it's more of a calligraphy thing for me. It always was a calligraphy of pulling the line. So I tried the Japanese brush, the great big round ones and all that, with the bamboo handles, but the end of the line would kind of like get pointy, or it get sloppy. I didn't like it. But with a chisel, I could actually do that old English cut.
Yeah, that line is...
And the square, I just bring it down just a little bit, and I got a perfect diamond and all that. I could put a skinny line right through it and cut it in half. It was beautiful. I didn't need a can.
I saw an interview where since we're going back in the day, you said your father never went to any of your art shows. Was he supportive of your art, or? No.
My dad was from Tijuana. He was a Mexican redneck and all that. And plus he was a gambler, because our family came from they all worked at the Hipódromo, the racetrack, the Caliente racetrack. So all the family gambled, and they were into partying and all that. And so my dad thought he was Frank Sinatra. They all dressed up and really cool.
It was that was the era, because I believe there's a generation where everybody that came here, as a Chicano myself, it was to be Americanized, right? Like everybody wanted that American
right.
value, right? Is that pretty much kind of the same thing?
We're the kids right after World War II. And right after that, everybody became united in their mind. Everybody was happy here. The way I understood. In 45, I was born in 49. The word was to assimilate and all that. And also at that time, the way they were raising kids is to be seen and not heard. So there wasn't a lot of love to the children at that time. So that you kids, you do what we say and that's it, and act like everybody else and assimilate. So that's why my generation, we have names like Charles and Henry and Carol and Robert and Richard. That's why we have all these Protestant names.
So then what drove you with, usually because any artist nowadays you interview and it's like, my family supports everything I do. What did you use as inspiration to keep doing what you're doing?
It was my mom.
Okay.
My mom was a wannabe artist. She took mosaic, macrame, all these kind of like crafts at the local park. And I really liked it. And then she got me involved in come to classes down at Barnesdale, up in Hollywood, and then to take drawing classes and all that stuff. And then because I always wanted to be an artist when I was born. I was drawing at 2. I knew I wanted to be an artist when I was 4 or 5.
What were you drawing at 2, if you could remember, or 4? What's your earliest drawings you can remember?
The Christmas tree. Yeah, I think it was the presents or something like that.
Self-interest, huh?
Yeah. I think it was these gigantic teddy bears that were bigger than us, and we all, my twin brother and I, we all cried, stuff like that.
So you're doing this art that's referred to as gutter art or street. Well, before even street art, it was it was frowned upon.
Yeah.
As you're doing this and you're growing, why the need for gallery acceptance then? If knowing that when you signed up for it or you're doing it, it's not really a mainstream thing. Why did you see the need to be accepted in galleries?
Well, because when I went to these art classes, I went also to the Pacific Asian Art Museum over there in Pasadena. And I was 14 by that time, and they were all connected to art galleries. So I saw Andy Warhol's first one-man show. It was not in New York. It was here in Pasadena. I saw his soup cans and his paintings of soup cans and all that. And then I met Marcel Duchamp, the conceptualist and all that stuff. And it wasn't that. And I asked him, I go, what does it take to be an artist? I didn't know how to be an artist. I didn't know what the concept was. And he goes, well, you just do it. Basically, he gave me the green light, and I didn't realize I was blocking myself. And in some ways, I wanted recognition, and the only recognition at that time was the galleries. There was only all the art magazines out of New York. Major galleries, New York. I wanted to go to New York. Why I needed that identity recognition is, I think it's, as an artist, you're always trying to find who you are. And nobody knows your work except other artists. And the arena was the gallery. That's what I thought, I just copied what other people were doing.
We all know the history with Senor Suerte, prominently displayed behind you. Have you ever encountered any issues or any conflicts displaying it, or do you display it a lot in your works, or? Because I know you mentioned that you retired it. If you could just elaborate a little bit on that, though.
Well, it's not a retirement, but yeah, in the beginning there was a rejection. I would take it over there to maybe to East LA and a couple of galleries over there, and they said no, it's anti-Chicano. It undermines everything positive that we're doing with the community. This is gangster art. This is bad boy art. This is gutter art. That's what they told me. And the other galleries up in Hollywood and on the west side, they said, I will never show this. Or they had too much respect for it, and it should stay in the streets, was their response. Until I finally showed it at the Gallery 01 in Hollywood, and where I met Big Daddy Roth and Robert Williams, the Hot Rodders. And they liked it. They said, well, Chaz, we don't know what it says, but it's bad boy, and we're all bad boys here and all that. So they enjoyed it. But it coming from Senor Suerte is a living person. Senor Suerte is that skull over there to your left side of your shoulder. See it, the human skull right up there?
Yes.
Okay, that was a skull that was given to me when I went to school in Guadalajara, in 1966. My friends, as a going away present, they dug up a body and they gave me the skull because that's what they all did is to do anatomy drawings. Nobody had enough money in the schools to do anatomy. So they all dug up bodies. So they gave me, I thought it was kind of cool, so they gave me the skull. I did know his name one time, but I forgot. You know. But it's got one gnarly tooth, and the drawing that I did from that became Senor Suerte. So it was always a living person. It was always my journey. It was always my identity. My uncle was a zoot suiter from the 40s. So when the movies came out, Shaft and Superfly and all that, and then with these black pimp daddies out of New York, and I thought they were cool. To me, my style is the 70s and all that stuff, you know, so, well, in the 60s. And then, so that's how it became Senor Suerte. It came from different kind of cultures, also the Dia de los Muertos of the skull. So I combined everything all together, you know.
With you dating back to the 60s and 70s, it's pretty much safe to say that graffiti predates hip-hop, right? Because hip-hop is early 80s, late 70s.
Yes, sir.
If you could just elaborate on that, though.
You know, because I had problem describing my skull as an identity. So let me say this. Every piece of artwork that every artist does is a self-portrait. You could tell his priorities, his sense of intent, how much time he's going to spend on it, what he's interested in, you know. It says a lot about the person's, character and all that. If you, deconstruct and analyze the painting, you get to know who that person is. That's what I was trying to do with this skull image. I wasn't trying to be a bad boy. I was saying, I'm here, I'm in your face, I have something to say, and I'm not ashamed of who I was, being Latin American and all that, because I was constantly being told, who are you, Italian or this or that, or, you're the first Chicano, or Chicano didn't exist. You're the first Mexican kid that we've ever hired up here, in the movie studios. I did a lot of work up there.
What were you doing, backdrops and stuff of that
No, I
nature?
was doing movie posters.
Oh,
And
wow.
all that, I was working with designers, movie posters, advertising, all that. I did that for about 15 years. But right away, I started seeing the same similarities between movie advertising, outdoor boards, and Chicano, Cholo, gangster graffiti, doing blocks out there, doing the lettering and all that, because we would be proud of what we would write. Flush left, flush right, we would line over line. We would make all the capital letters all the same, showing pride there, showing pride in our community and who we were. So in some ways, I started seeing the same similarities. And I asked myself, well, who owns the streets? People who pay for the outdoor boards and all that? Or the people who go out there and take it? So in some ways, graffiti is something that you don't need permission.
Well, with the influence of, and I don't like using certain words, so I'll say like LA culture, for lack of a better term. But
I like it.
LA culture, how do you feel now that it's around the world and they're using the LA style that comes from the LA culture, but they've never experienced it? How do you feel about that? Like knowing that it's gone that far, but they've never encountered the same things that people growing up in the LA culture have to go through.
All right. Our LA culture is bigger than us and all that. When I first saw Up in Smoke, for example, Cheech, who's a good friend of mine, and he was in a lowrider, all pinstriped out and all that, he's looking good. But he had a surfboard, and it was a convertible, and all that kind of stuff, mixing surf and lowrider, and he lives out in Malibu because that's where the movie was, and then it showed a little bit of Highland Park and all that. It's a mixed culture. It's kind of a Chino, Latino, Cholo surf, because the surfers, the Z-boys, they were all had bandanas, and they were using some of our letters for Dogtown and all that. And as young little kids, we took up skateboarding, but we had, it was before everything. We had steel wheels on 2x6s, and we would go down to the beach, and down in Manhattan Beach or Venice Beach, down to POP, Pacific Ocean Park. We would see the Z-boys down there. We would throw rocks at them and all that, because we We thought that they weren't cool, you know that. So, but we were always kind of like mixed culture. So when I see you ask me, what do I think about our culture being exported around the world? You can't deny we're cool. Everybody wants it and all that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
I get Germans out here that come out there. They want to go and paint in East L.A. And then some friends of mine take them out there, and they get hit up. They get spotted. They go, and they get called out. They said, "Hey, where you guys from?" They go, "Well, we're from Dusseldorf." You know, everybody laughs. You know, you take them, you give them a beer. You know, they want to see the big tree. You know that. They want to see our culture. They want to see all that. You know, in some ways, I embrace that.
Okay.
You know, we're big. We're tribal. We're big in the Philippines, man. I get emails from Cambodia. They all with striped shirts and all that stuff, like Thailand, Sao Paulo, Brazil. They're all, lowrider bicycles and all that. And they're all telling me they love the Cholo culture, but not the violence. I think they say, but our clothes are real good in hot weather.
Yeah, but that's the thing I was getting at, is that they are able to do it without having to deal with the LA culture.
They don't get it.
Yeah.
All right, I get that. They don't get it. But they see that what they like about us, they say that we're about family, and we're about community, and we're about believing in one another, and protecting our culture and all that. They tell me a lot of good things that I hear about, what I hear the good things about here. So in some ways, the exporting what we're doing is the good part. And if they want it, you can't stop it. And you know something, I think they really have to come here to LA to get the source. That's what I do. If they want a real painting, a real East LA painting from me or my friends and all that, cartoon, Esteban, me, they got to come to LA, and they do.
www.OGHusky Radio. Stay posted. More interview to come.